The screams never stopped. For days, the sky above the alien world of Valora burned red and black. It's filled with smoke, ash, and the monstrous shapes of things not meant to exist. The creatures came without warning, huge twisted beasts of flesh and metal, their eyes glowing like embers, their claws shredding everything they touched. Cities fell in ours. Towers crumbled. Millions fled into the wilderness, their cries for help rising into the choking air, unheard by any power that could save them. The ground shook beneath the weight of the monster's endless march, and everywhere death followed. Valora's last remaining leaders gathered inside a broken command bunker buried deep underground.
Ow.
The walls trembled with distant explosions. Dust fell from the ceiling with every impact. The room smelled of sweat, fear, and blood. The alien faces, once proud and noble, were pale, hollow, desperate. Their voices were hoarse from shouting over the constant noise of destruction, but still they argued. Still they fought to find some way to survive. "We have no army left," one of them whispered, his eyes wide with terror. "We can't stop them. They will hunt us to the last child." Another rasped, "We must send the call." There was silence then, heavy, cold, full of unspoken fear, because everyone in that room knew what the call meant. It meant reaching beyond their own kind, beyond their own people. It meant begging the stars for help. No one knew what might answer, but they had no choice. With shaking hands, the highest commander stepped forward and pressed a trembling finger to the dusty control panel. The emergency beacon, untouched for centuries, hummed to life.
Oh, simple.
Message coded in every galactic language flashed across space. "This is Valora. We plead for aid. We are under attack. We are dying. Please, help us." The signal leaped across the void of space, faster than light, faster than sound, faster than hope itself. It passed the cold moons of dead worlds, the shattered remains of forgotten empires. It echoed through empty systems where no one lived to hear it. For hours it traveled, for days, for weeks, until it reached a world unlike any other. A Deathworld, Earth, inside a massive black warship that drifted silently at the edge of the Sol system.
And the message was received.
The ship, one of Earth's most powerful military carriers, had no name spoken aloud. Its surface was dark and cold, its engines silent, its guns sleeping. But inside, the humans stirred. Not just any humans, Deathworlders. Soldiers born from a world so dangerous, so violent, that their very biology had turned them into something the galaxy feared. The signal played across the cold steel walls of the command bridge. A soft voice, a desperate plea, a cry for help, Commander. Voss stood still as stone, his face half lit by the flickering glow of the transmission. His eyes, gray and sharp as blades, did not blink. Around him, officers waited in tense silence. No one spoke. No one moved. They all knew what would happen next. "Coordinates," Voss said quietly. The officer on his right pressed the controls. "Locked, Sir Valora. Outer Rim Sector. Alien species non-hostile. Heavy casualties. Threat unknown." Voss gave a slight nod. "Mobilize the fleet. Full combat readiness." The officer hesitated. "Orders, sir? Aid or suppression?" For one long moment, the commander said nothing. His eyes stared through the holographic map, as if already seeing the burning cities, the broken towers, the faces of the dying. And then, with a voice as cold as the space between stars, he answered, "Rescue mission. But standard protocols apply." The words were simple, but their meaning was clear. The Deathworlders were coming. The great ships of Earth stirred from their silent slumber. Engines roared to life, shaking the dark holes with power that could level continents. Thousands of black-armored soldiers, expressionless, silent, filed into dropships, their visors hiding every trace of humanity. Weapons the galaxy had only whispered about in fear were brought online. Plasma cannons, railguns, drones that moved like silent sharks through the air. The Deathworlders never traveled light. They never came soft. Even when called for help, They came ready for war. Valora's signal had been answered, and something far worse than monsters was on its way. Back on Valora, the people still ran. The monsters still tore through the ruins. The cities once full of music, light, and laughter had become graveyards. But as the fires burned, as the night fell once more over the smoking world, the first alien survivors looked to the stars and saw distant shapes moving dark. Enormous shapes gliding through the upper atmosphere. The help had arrived at first. They cheered from the shattered rooftops, from the broken streets. The alien survivors raised their hands and shouted words. Of relief, they believed salvation had come. They believed rescue was near. They didn't know. They didn't understand. The humans who answered their call were not saviors. They were something else. The Deathworlders touched down on the first battlefront without words. Massive black carriers slammed into the ground, kicking up clouds of dust and ash. From inside, rows of armored soldiers emerged, silent, perfect, emotionless. They moved like machines. Their weapons gleamed in the blood-colored light. Their visors reflected nothing but death. The aliens approached cautiously, waving brightly colored flags of peace. They spoke soft words. They pointed to the smoking ruins, to the distant roars of the biomonsters still tearing through the countryside. "Help us," one of them begged, his voice shaking. "Please, help us." The Deathworlders did not reply. They simply moved forward, and behind them, the Iron Fleet covered the sky. The first shots fired came minutes later, not against the aliens, but against the creatures that had slaughtered them. The Deathworlders moved with cold precision, tracking, destroying, where the monsters had rampaged unchecked for weeks. Now they died in seconds.
Asthma.
Beams cut through their hides. Railguns punched through bone and armor. The Deathworlders hunted without mercy, without hesitation, without fear. The alien survivors watched in stunned silence. For the first time in weeks, the monsters were falling, dying, burning. But with each passing hour, as the humans spread through, the cities something colder crept into the hearts of the alien people. The way the soldiers never spoke, the way their faces remained hidden, the way they moved not like rescuers, like conquerors. A terrible question rose in the minds of those who watched. Had they traded one nightmare for another? And in the shadows of the burning streets, as the black flags of Earth were raised over the ruins, the truth slowly unfolded. The Deathworlders had come, and Valora would never be the same again. The ground trembled long before the people of Valora saw them. In every shattered city and every broken village, the survivors lifted their heads as a deep, unnatural hum filled the air. It was not the roar of the creatures that had been hunting. Them, it was not the sound of wind or thunder. It was something worse, something colder. A sound that came from the sky itself. The Deathworlders were here, great ships. Black as midnight, descended from the smoke-choked clouds, casting enormous shadows over the ruined streets. The alien survivors, some barely more than children. Some burned and bleeding, stared up with eyes wide in hope and terror. They had sent the signal. They'd begged for help. And now, help had come. But as the first of Earth's dropships slammed into the ground, throwing up clouds of dust and ash, that hope began to fade. The ships were not like anything they had ever seen. Sharp, jagged, dark. They looked not like vessels of mercy, but like weapons forged from nightmares. Massive steel jaws, blazing engines, weapons already locked and ready before the doors even opened. The alien people huddled together, unsure, frightened. They whispered to each other in shaking voices. And then the soldiers came. The Deathworlders stepped into the light with slow, heavy footsteps that made the ground shudder. Tall, broad, wrapped in black armor that glowed with soft red lights. Their helmets were smooth, reflective, hiding every trace of the face beneath. No eyes, no mouths, no expressions, just silence. They carried weapons the size of bodies, sleek and deadly, held steady in their cold, metal hands. The people of Valora had never seen creatures like this. For a moment, No one moved. The alien skin bruised, eyes wide stood, frozen as the human. Soldiers formed perfect lines, their weapons raised not at the civilians, but at the distant ruins where the biomonsters still howled. The air was heavy, suffocating. Somewhere a child cried. Somewhere a mother whispered prayers that no one answered then. Without warning, the first command came. A human officer, a figure in thicker armor with golden stripes, spoke in a voice that carried through hidden speakers. The words were not in any known language, but the tone left no doubt. Orders, precision, authority. Soldiers moved immediately, without hesitation, spreading out in all directions. Drones lifted from their ships, slicing through the air like silent hawks. Steel towers unfolded, rising from the ground with terrifying speed. Within minutes, the humans had established full control of the landing zones. The aliens looked at each other confused. They had asked for help. They had begged for rescue. But this felt different. There were no greetings, no words of comfort, no faces to trust. Only cold, efficient movement, only the sharp presence of power. And then the shooting began. The monsters, the twisted, bone-armored horrors that had destroyed Valora's cities, came screaming from the ruins. Huge creatures, faster than tanks, covered in claws, teeth, and metal spikes. The humans did not flinch. They moved like machines, their black visors glowing softly as their weapons roared to life. The first plasma blasts tore through the air, slicing the monsters apart with savage speed. Railguns fired with deafening cracks, punching holes through armored flesh. Drones zipped overhead, launching miniature missiles that exploded in white-hot flashes. The Deathworlders moved forward in perfect silence, boots crushing bones beneath them, their guns never stopping. The aliens stood frozen as the very monsters that had driven them to the brink of extinction were slaughtered in minutes. It was not a battle, it was an execution. The ground shook, the air burned. The bodies of the beasts lay in twisted piles, smoking, twitching. The human soldiers barely paused. No cheers, no shouts, no victory cries, just cold precision. They moved on, already scanning for the next targets. Some of the alien survivors fell to their knees, tears streaming down their faces. Some cried out in joy, but others watched in growing dread. They saw the way the humans never removed their helmets, the way they never looked at the terrified civilians, the way they moved as if they owned the very air itself. The Deathworlders had saved them, but at what cost? In the hours that followed, more ships arrived. Massive black carriers touched down across the planet, vomiting forth endless waves of soldiers, drones, walkers, and machinery. The sky above Valora was no longer red with fire. With steel, cities were sealed, roads were blocked. Alien families were herded into safe zones, surrounded by fences, watched by silent human guards whose cold visors never wavered at first. The aliens obeyed. They were too broken, too exhausted, too desperate to resist. They moved when ordered. They accepted the ration packs thrown at their feet. They huddled together in silence, grateful that the monsters were gone yet haunted by the feeling that something worse had taken their place. In one ruined city square, alien elder, his face lined with grief, approached a human officer. Carefully, his hands trembled as he spoke in the old tongue, pleading softly. "Thank you. Thank you for saving us." The human did not answer. The officer's helmeted head turned slightly. No words, no warmth. Just that cold, unreadable mask. The alien's voice faltered, stepped back, his breath quickening. He felt it now, the truth beneath the rescue. The truth he had refused to see. The Deathworlders were not here as saviors. They were something else entirely. And as the last of the biomonsters were hunted down and burned, the humans did not stop. They began building more towers, more walls, more weapons. The fences grew taller. The patrols doubled. Supply lines were secured not for the survivors, but for the soldiers. The cold, black flag of Earth was planted in the soil. Valora had been saved, but it had also been claimed. The survivors of Valorith, who still had breath left in their bodies sat in the shadows of their ruined homes and watched the black-armored soldiers march by. In their hearts, they began to wonder, had the monsters ever really left? Or had they only changed their shape? The monsters were dead, but the fear remained. Smoke still rose from the shattered ruins of Valora's cities. The air still tasted of ash and blood. Families huddled in broken homes, their eyes always watching the skies, their hearts still beating, with the terror of the creatures that had almost ended their world. But the true fear, the deeper fear, came not from the monsters outside the city walls. It came from within. It came from the cold, silent soldiers who now walked their streets, the Deathworlders. At first, the people of Valora tried to believe. In hope, they told each other soft lies as they buried their dead and patched their wounds. They said the humans had come to save them. They said the fear would pass. But with every hour that ticked by, those lies crumbled like dust in the wind. The human soldiers never spoke to them. They never smiled, never removed their black helmets. They moved through the ruins like ghosts of iron, their guns always ready, their visors reflecting nothing but emptiness. They set up checkpoints. They divided the cities into zones. They herded the survivors into makeshift camps surrounded by electric fences. And when anyone disobeyed, when anyone questioned, those people disappeared, one by one, without a sound, in the heart of the capital, where the tallest buildings still stood in broken shadows. The humans constructed something new, a command citadel, cold, sharp, built from steel that seemed to rise from the ground overnight. It cast a long, dark shadow over what remained of Valora's once beautiful skyline. Every day, more ships descended from the black sky, bringing more soldiers, more machines, more weapons, and with them came fear. The people of Valora were no longer hunted by monsters. They were occupied in one of the refugee camps. A hollowed-out marketplace filled with ragged tents. An alien mother sat beside her sick child, her hands shaking as she tried to soothe him. The child coughed, his small body weak and thin. Around them, hundreds of others waited silently, too afraid to speak. They had no medicine, no food. The soldiers brought rations only when ordered. They offered no comfort, no kindness, only control. Near the camp's edge, a group of young aliens whispered in the shadows. "This isn't rescue," one of them said, his voice low, angry. "This is something else. Should be grateful," another hissed. "They saved us." His head saved us, or conquered us. The words hung heavy between them, because deep down, they all felt it. The wrongness. The cold emptiness in the humans' movements. The silence of their faces. The fact that not once, not even once, had they seen a human show warmth. It was not the behavior of rescuers. It was the behavior of predators far above the surface. Aboard one of Earth's orbiting warships, Commander Voss stood in the cold glow of the tactical display. His face was as hard as the steel around him. His voice soft, sharp. "Status," he said. An officer straightened. "The bio-threat has been eliminated. All major cities secured. Alien population contained." Voss nodded slowly. "Resistance?" "Passive." At best, the commander's eyes narrowed. "Maintain pressure. Continue resource extraction protocols. Prepare for Phase 2. Another officer cleared her throat, hesitating. "Sir." The civilians, Voss's eyes flicked toward her. Civilians are irrelevant. The room fell silent. No one spoke again. Back on the ground, the humans expanded their reach. They dismantled what remained of Valora's ancient monuments. They tore down statues. They erased names, changed maps, replaced language with cold earth symbols. The people watched in silent horror as their history vanished one stone at a time. And when the first rebellion began, it was small. A spark. A group of alien farmers, once peaceful, now broken, refused to leave their land when human machines moved in to claim it. They stood with empty hands, defiant, shaking but unbowed. The Deathworlders responded without words. Gunfire shattered the morning air. The bodies of the farmers lay broken in the dirt. The others were herded away. No trial. No warning. Just the same cold silence. The message was clear. Obey or be erased. The next day, a mural appeared on a wall. In the dead city, a hand-painted image of the earth, ships with blood dripping from their engines. No one claimed it. No one needed to. The humans saw it. They burned it down. But the next day, another appeared. Then another. And another. The people were beginning to wake up. They were beginning to see the truth. Elsewhere, in one of the human outposts, a single soldier named Clark sat alone in her quarters, her helmet resting on the metal floor beside her. Her hands trembled. Her eyes stared at the screen, replaying security footage images of what they had done, what she had done. The farmers, the refugees, the screaming faces. Clark's breath came in shallow gasps. Her heart pounded. Face. Her mind spinning. This wasn't what they had told her. They had called it a rescue mission. They had called it peacekeeping. But the faces of the dying haunted her. The silence of her own side chilled her blood. And in that moment, deep in the heart of the iron machine, one spark of doubt flickered in the darkness. She didn't know yet, but that small spark would change everything. On Valora's shattered streets, as night fell once more over the ruins, fires burned in secret places. Quiet voices gathered in hidden rooms. And from the ashes of fear, something new began to rise. The will to resist. The will to fight. The monsters were gone. But the war was far from over. Night came like a heavy shroud, thick with smoke and fear, covering the ruined cities of Valora in silence. But it was not the peaceful silence of rest. It was the tense, suffocating stillness of a hunted people, those too afraid to speak too, broken to move, too haunted to dream. The Deathworlders still marched in the streets, their black boots crushing ash and bone with every step. Their glowing visors scanned the darkness, their cold weapons always ready. They never spoke. They never looked at the people they had come to save. And under the weight of their endless presence, something ancient stirred deep within the hearts of Valora's survivors, the will to resist. It began in whispers, in the back alleys of the sealed zones, where the human patrols rarely passed. Small groups of survivors gathered in the ruins. They spoke softly, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. They had nothing, no weapons, no strength, but they still had breath. And as long as breath remained, so too did the spark of defiance. We cannot live like this. An elder whispered, her voice thin as smoke. They are not saviors. They are conquerors. Another younger nodded. We have nothing left to lose. Around them, the others listened. Farmers, teachers, children, those who had seen their homes burned, those who had buried their families. They knew the cost of standing. They knew the price. But they also knew something far colder. They were already dying. Above them, the human ships still floated in the poisoned sky. Black giants, silent, watching. The occupation had no face, no mercy. Every day, more fences, more restrictions, more disappearances. Anyone who disobeyed vanished, swallowed by the cold machine of Earth's iron rule. And yet the whispers grew. Shared what little they had, scraps of food, stolen tools, broken communication devices. They mapped the patrol routes. They marked the supply lines. They gathered crude weapons, sharpened metal, old hunting rifles, explosives made from chemicals scavenged in the ruins. They called themselves nothing, gave themselves no flag. But they knew one truth. The war was not over, far above the surface. Aboard the human flagship, Commander Voss reviewed reports in silence. His eyes moved over lists of numbers. Cities secured, resource extraction totals, civilian compliance rates. The words meant nothing to him beyond their utility. Everything was proceeding as planned. Resistance activity detected in Sector 4, an officer reported quietly. Small, uncoordinated. Voss gave no sign of concern. Increase patrols. Apply pressure. Execute standard counterinsurgency. The officer hesitated. Civilian casualties, sir. Acceptable, Voss said, his voice flat. Control must be absolute. The words were spoken with the calm of someone who no longer saw the difference between living beings and numbers. On a screen, to him, Valora was already conquered. The resistance was a spark beneath his boot, but on the ground, that spark was catching fire, in a forgotten basement beneath a crumbling library. The heart of the hidden rebellion beat quietly. Dozens of survivors crouched in the dark, their faces lit by the flicker of salvaged lights. Maps were spread across the floor. Makeshift radios clicked softly. And at the center, a scarred former soldier of Velaruth, the last of the planetary. Defense forces spoke in a low, steady voice. "We can't defeat them in open battle," he said. "But we can strike. We can make them bleed. We can remind them we are not their slaves." The others nodded. Some with fear, some with rage. All with resolve. Their first target was chosen. A human supply convoy moving through the dead streets, carrying weapons, rations, fuel. Lightly guarded, vulnerable. The plan was simple, and it was deadly. At dawn, as the Deathworlder convoy rumbled through the hollow city, the rebels struck. Hidden explosives, crude but powerful, erupted beneath the lead vehicle. Fire rolled through the air. The human soldiers reacted instantly. Weapons raised, formation locked tight. But the rebels moved fast, merging from shadows, hurling Molotov bombs, firing stolen rifles. They didn't aim to win. They aimed to remind the invaders that the planet still had teeth. Within minutes, the fight was over, as the humans crushed. The attack, with ruthless efficiency, plasma blasts cut down the alien fighters. Drones hunted survivors like steel hawks. The streets ran red again, but the damage had been done. A convoy lost. A message sent. The Deathworlders bled. In one of the human command posts, a soldier named Clark watched the footage on her screen, her heart heavy. The images burned into her mind. The desperate faces of the rebels, the cold silence of her own side, the gunfire that never seemed to end. She could barely breathe. Every part of her training screamed to obey, to follow orders, to shut out the doubt. But she couldn't. Something inside her was breaking. That night, Clark sat alone beneath the artificial lights of her barracks, her hands shaking as she typed into a secure console. A message, a simple message, sent not to her superiors but to the ground. "I can help. I don't want this. I won't be part of this." She didn't know if anyone would hear it. She didn't know what she was doing. But she knew one thing. The line between savior and monster had vanished. And she could no longer pretend. On Valora's broken streets, the rebellion whispered once. More they knew they would die. They knew the price. The fire was lit. The silent enemy that walked their streets had not broken them. Not yet. And as the black flags of Earth rippled in the toxic winds, the first true heartbeat of rebellion echoed in the darkness. The uprising had begun. The city burned again, but this time it was not the monstrous creatures of old that set it alight. It was the people, the survivors of Velarizing, at last against the cold iron grip of their so-called saviors. The uprising began in the early hours of dawn, when the sky still wore the bruises of night. The black warships of Earth drifted silently above, their engines glowing like the eyes of dead gods. The first shot came from a rooftop, an old hunting rifle, shaking in the hands of a young alien who had lost everything but his fury. The single crack of gunfire echoed through the silent streets like thunder. A Deathworlder soldier dropped, motionless, lifeless. His black armor splattered with blood. The city held its breath, and then it exploded. All at once, the hidden resistance rose from every dark corner, from shattered homes, from underground tunnels, from behind the ruins of burned-out towers. They struck with makeshift weapons, rusted guns, explosives built from scraps, firebombs crafted from broken machines. The people who had once knelt in fear now screamed in defiance. The humans were caught off guard. For a heartbeat, just when they faltered, the rebels poured through the streets, shouting, firing, burning everything that bore the mark of Earth. Supply depots went up in flames. Communication towers cracked and crumbled. Patrols were ambushed in alleys lit by fire. The rebels moved fast, knowing the window of surprise was thin. Every second counted. In the command citadel at the heart of the occupation zone, alarms screamed. Commander Voss stood motionless as his officers relayed reports sector after sector falling into chaos. Uprising in Grid 6, explosions in the East Quarter. Patrols down. Heavy resistance, one officer reported breathlessly. Voss's voice was calm. Mobilize shock units. Deploy drones. Eliminate resistance. No survivors. The order went out without hesitation, and the retribution began. Black armored soldiers flooded the streets with terrifying speed. Gunfire roared through the city like a living storm. Drones swept low, their weapons cutting down rebels by the dozens. Railguns mounted on steel walkers pounded entire buildings into rubble. The humans moved with cold precision, every step part of a machine too vast to stop. But the rebels didn't break. They bled. They burned. They died in the streets they once called home, but they didn't stop, even as their friends fell beside them, even as the Deathworlders closed in. They fought with the wild desperation of those who had already lost everything, because they knew surrender was just another kind of death. In the chaos, a new figure emerged, one the humans hadn't expected. Lieutenant Clark. She moved through the smoke-choked alleys. Her stolen human gear stripped of insignia, her helmet left behind so that her facepell determined, alive, could be seen. A stolen rifle slung over her back, and a satchel filled with stolen codes, stolen maps, stolen knowledge. The rebels stared at her with distrust and fear, a human one of them. But Clark raised her hands and spoke, her voice breaking with urgency. I can help you. I know how they fight. I know how to stop them. There was hesitation. Guns raised. Shouts of confusion, and then the rebel commander, a scarred elder with eyes like shattered glass, stepped forward. He looked into Clark's face for a long moment. He saw something there. Not the coldness of the other humans, not the emptiness, but something real, something broken. Then help us, the elder said softly. Help us take our world back. Clark nodded once, and with that, she joined the uprising. The battle spread like wildfire. The rebels, armed with new knowledge, weak points in the human patrol routes, locations of fuel depots, blind spots in drone coverage, struck harder, faster. Clark led small squads through hidden paths, guiding them to targets no alien could have found alone. Explosions lit the city in flashes of red and orange. The sky itself seemed to burn, but the Deathworlders responded with terrifying force. The more the rebels struck, the harder the humans hit back. Entire city blocks were flattened by orbital strikes. Camps were torn apart by aerial drones. Civilians, those too weak to fight, were rounded up, herded into tighter, colder containment zones. The occupation tightened like a noose in one such containment zone. A mother clutched her child to her chest, her eyes glassy with terror as human soldiers marched past her cage. The sounds of gunfire echoed beyond the walls. She whispered softly, rocking back and forth, her words lost to the wind. Stay quiet. Stay hidden. Just a little longer. But the war outside grew louder. By nightfall, the air itself felt alive with violence. Fires burned unchecked. Sirens wailed. In the distance, the Iron Fleet hovered, its cannons pointed downward, its engines glowing like twin suns of death. The humans were preparing for escalation. Total extermination. Clark knew it. She saw the signs. She read the orders before she defected. If the resistance pushed too far, too fast, Earth's protocols would not allow mercy. They would wipe Valora clean. No survivors, no rebellion. Just a dead rock beneath silent stars in Yetivan. Knowing that she fought because something inside her had cracked open, the faces of the people, the real people, haunted her. Their courage, their grief, their refusal to kneel. She knew she could never go back to what she was. The first uprising burned through the night. By morning, the fire still smoldered. Streets were painted with ash, with blood, with broken machines and shattered bodies. The rebellion had won no cities, no territory. But they had won something far greater, They had shown the Deathworlders that Valora would not die quietly in the cold halls of the command citadel. Commander Voss watched the reports with expressionless eyes. He gave new orders. He planned the next phase. But somewhere deep, buried, he felt it. The first true resistance, and on the ground among the ruins. The rebels buried their dead in silence and prepared for the war that was still to come. The city smoldered beneath a sky of cold iron and rising smoke. Fires burned in the ruins, their glow flickering like dying stars, while the black ships of Earth drifted silently above, unshaken, untouched, unbothered. The first uprising had ended, but the silence that followed was worse than the battle itself. It was the silence of something dark, something vast, something preparing to crush an entire world without mercy. The people of Valora waited in that silence. They waited for the next blow to fall, and it was coming. Commander Voss stood at the heart of the human citadel, his hands folded behind his back, his gray eyes locked on the endless stream of tactical data pouring. Across the holoscreens, losses, minimal, but fragmented. Phase 2. Imminent. The words meant nothing to him beyond their usefulness. This was not war. This was a correction. Valora would be secured. Its people would be pacified, erased. His orders had been clear from the beginning. Earth demanded control, and Voss would deliver it. But not everyone aboard the Iron Fleet agreed. Far above the planet, in the cold belly of one of the orbital carriers, Lieutenant Clark stood alone. In a dim metal corridor, her breath misting in the recycled air, her heart pounded. Her hands trembled. In her mind, she saw the faces of the people on the ground, the mothers, the children, the blood-soaked fighters who had nothing left but defiance. She couldn't be part of this anymore. She wouldn't. But defiance came with a price. Clark had seen the secret orders. She had seen the files buried deep inside the command system's files marked for command eyes only. Valora was never meant to be saved. Call for aid had been an opportunity. A resource-rich planet, weakened, easy to seize. The destruction of the biomonsters was only step 1. Step 2 was colonization. Step 3 was extermination of any resistance. Total occupation, permanent control. Earth's shadow would stretch across Valora forever, and no one back home would. Ever know? Clark's hands clenched into fists. She felt the weight of her decision pressing down like steel chains. But she moved anyway. Her boots echoed down the corridor as she made her way to the secure flight bay. Her stolen access codes trembling in her hand. One chance, one betrayal, one act of defiance that might still save what was left of Valora below. On the planet's shattered surface, the hidden rebellion gathered again. Their numbers were broken. Their weapons were few. But the fire still burned in their eyes. The elder rebel leader, his face lined with ash and scars, stood before the survivors with quiet determination. They will come again, he said softly. Harder, deadlier. But we have one chance left. In the crowd, someone whispered, "How? We can't fight their ships." And that was the truth. The sky itself belonged to the Deathworlders. The black warships controlled the air, the ground, the orbit, without a way to strike at the heart of that cold machine. The rebellion would die in the dirt like all the others who had dared to rise against Earth. And then Clark arrived. Her shuttle, small and fast, touched down in the dead city. Under cover of darkness, she stepped out with her hands raised, unarmed, her breath catching in her throat as dozens of alien fighters aimed weapons at her chest. For a moment, there was only tension, only the thin line between life and death. And then the rebel elder stepped forward, their eyes met. Without words, Clark handed him the stolen codes. Flight paths, defense grids, fuel reserves, all of it, she whispered, her voice shaking. I can get you inside the orbit. The elder's eyes narrowed. Why? Clark swallowed hard. Because I can't be part of this. Because I've seen what they'll do to you. Because I'd rather die here than help them do it. There was silence. Then slowly the elder nodded, and so the plan was born. A desperate strike, a betrayal in the sky. The rebels would not strike the ground forces. They would not waste their lives fighting drones and railguns. They would aim higher at the black ships themselves. If they could destroy the command vessel, even at the cost of their own lives, they could shatter the chain of control. Could give Valora a fighting chance. The next night, under the cover of storms, a stolen human shuttle lifted from the ruined city, its engines flickering as it climbed higher, higher, higher into the poisonous sky. Inside, a small team of rebels barely. A dozen sat in silence, their eyes locked on the stars above. Beside them, Clark piloted the craft, her hands steady, her breath slow. The shuttle passed through the first defense perimeter. No alarms, no. Challenge her stolen codes worked, but the risk was far from over. As the black warships of Earth loomed closer, the silence became suffocating. The shuttle trembled in the thin air. The rebel fighters clutched their crude explosives, their hands slick with sweat. They knew they would not return. They knew this was a one-way flight, and yet not one of them spoke of fear. They had already buried their fear in the command citadel. Alarms suddenly blared. Unauthorized vessel inbound. An officer shouted. Commander Voss's head snapped up, his voice cold and sharp. Identify. Human shuttle, sir. Friendly codes. But it's not on any mission log. Voss's eyes narrowed. Something deep, something instinctive, twisted in his chest. Destroy it. The order came too late. The rebels broke through. The last perimeter, just as the railguns locked on. Clark's hands moved fast, guiding the shuttle into a suicide dive straight toward the belly of the command carrier. The rebels' faces set, hearts burning, ignited the charges, and in the next breath, the sky itself split apart. The explosion tore through the black ship in a bloom of fire and metal. Shockwaves rippled through orbit, alarms screamed, systems crashed. In that moment, brief, wild, glorious, the iron grip of Earth faltered. The people of Valora, watching from the ground, saw the burning wreckage fall from the heavens, and they raised their voices, not in fear, but in hope. The Deathworlders had bled, and the war was far from over. The sky burned. For the first time since the Deathworlders arrived, the people of Valora looked upward and saw something they never thought possible. The wreckage of an Earth warship tumbling down in flames. The dark, monstrous shape that once hovered like a god over their broken cities was now nothing but twisted metal and falling fire. Crashing into the dead plains beyond the capital, a cheer rose from the ground, a sound of disbelief, of defiance, of hope. The uprising had struck its first real blow, but the war was far from over. Inside the remaining warships of the Iron Fleet, panic rippled through the cold ranks. Officers shouted commands, systems blinked red, and the silent confidence that had carried the human invasion now cracked like glass under pressure. One of their own ships, destroyed. By civilians. By aliens they had called weak. Commander Voss stood motionless in the heart of the chaos. His face, carved from stone, did not shift as reports poured in. The words meant little to him. His mind had already moved past the shock. Prepare full planetary purge, he said quietly. The officers hesitated. Sir, there are still civilians. Voss's voice cut through the noise like a blade. All resistance, all structures, all biological life. Burn it. The order was final. The mask of mercy the Deathworlders had worn was gone. The truth of Earth's mission, total domination, now revealed. The final phase had begun. The fleet engines roared. Mass drivers rotated into position, the ground beneath. Valora's feet trembled as orbital weapons powered up massive cannons capable of vaporizing entire city blocks in one strike. The people watched in horror as the sky filled with black fire. And yet even then, even at the edge of annihilation, the rebellion refused to kneel. In the hidden tunnels beneath the old capital, what remained of the uprising gathered, bloodied, exhausted, but alive. The rebel elder, his face lined with dust and pain, stood beside Clark, her human uniform torn and stained, her eyes hollow but burning with grim determination. They will destroy us all, Clark said softly. They won't stop. Elder's voice was low, steady. Then we stop them first. But how? The Iron Fleet was still in orbit. The human army still held the major zones. The planet's defenses were gone. Every path forward led to death, and then one voice, small, quiet, spoke from the corner. A young alien mechanic, barely more than a child, stepped forward, clutching a cracked datapad and shaking hands. "There's something," he whispered. Away, eyes turned toward him. The boy swallowed hard. The humans. They use a central AI core. It controls the fleet, the ground forces, everything, if we could reach it. Shut it down. The idea was insane, impossible, and yet Clark's eyes sharpened. Where? The boy's fingers trembled as he traced a shaking line across the cracked map. The central citadel. Underground. Deep. It was suicide. The citadel was the most heavily guarded fortress on Valora. Its armored patrols, drones, automated defenses. No one could reach it. No one could survive. But they had no choice. The rebellion moved fast. Through the ruins, through the fire, they gathered what few weapons remained. Explosives, stolen rifles, makeshift armor. Clark led from the front, her mind a whirlwind of fear and determination. Every step she took felt like a lifetime. She knew what waited ahead. She knew what they risked. But she kept moving. They all did. Because if they failed, Valora would burn. The assault on the citadel began at midnight. The rebels struck with the desperation of the doomed, hurling firebombs, smashing through barricades using every trick, every scrap of knowledge they had gathered. The Deathworlders responded with cold precision. Gunfire roared through the streets. Explosions lit the night. Bodies fell on both sides. And still the rebels pressed forward. Clark led a small team through the eastern breach, her breath ragged, her rifle shaking in her hands. The walls of the citadel loomed above them, black towers crowned with iron spires. Automated drones swooped down, their plasma weapons hissing through the air. The rebels scattered, diving for cover, turning fire where they could. But for every soldier that fell, another rose. One by one, they reached the inner doors. The last defense. The AI core lay just beyond. Clark planted the explosives herself. Her hands numb, her mind racing. Detonators blinked softly. Behind her, the elder rebel gave a single nod. There were no words left to say. They all knew. The doors blew inward in a wave of fire. The team rushed inside through corridors of steel, past the cold hum of alien machinery until they reached it, a vast underground chamber, its walls lined with cables and black glass, its heart pulsing with pale blue light. The AI core, it was alive, and it was watching them. Clark moved first, racing toward the control nodes. Her fingers flew across the screens, her breath sharp and quick. The AI fought backlocking systems, triggering defenses. Sirens screamed. Drones flooded the halls behind them. Time was running out. Now, the elder shouted. The rebels held the door, their weapons blazing. Clark's voice cracked. Almost, and then silence. The lights flickered. The AI core dimmed, and across the skies of Valora, the Iron Fleet shuddered and fell still. Weapons powered down. Engines stalled. The black giants in orbit drifted like dead husks, blind, deaf, lost. On the ground, human soldiers cut off from command froze in confusion. The machine had been severed, the chain of control shattered. The impossible had happened. Valora was still standing. In the ruins of the citadel, Clark fell to her knees, her chest heaving. Around her, rebels, those who survived, stared in disbelief as the distant thunder of human weapons fell silent at last. The first great battle was over, but as the sun rose over the broken world, they knew the Deathworlders were not finished, and neither were they. The sky was quiet at last. For the first time in months, no black ships floated overhead. No iron machines rumbled through the broken streets. The terrible roar of railguns and plasma fire had gone silent. The people of Velarogd bloodied. Hollow-eyed stepped cautiously from the ruins, lifted their faces to the dawn. They had survived, but they knew it was not over. The heart of the Deathworlders, power the AI core, had been destroyed. Their mighty fleet now drifted helpless in orbit, blind and silent. Ground patrols, cut off from command, wandered without purpose. The iron grip that had strangled the planet had cracked, and yet the danger remained. Commander Voss still lived, somewhere. Deep in the shattered remains of the command citadel, the architect of the invasion clung to power like a wounded beast. His communications were gone, his control severed. But his mind-cold calculating was untouched. He would not surrender, would not yield, and he had one last weapon. In a dark chamber beneath the ruins, Voss activated the Omega Protocola final failsafe, buried deep within Earth's military code. A weapon designed for extinction. If he could not have Valora, he would erase it. Every living thing, every trace of resistance. One last act of absolute control. The countdown began. Above, in the war-torn streets, Clark felt it first. A deep hum in the ground, a vibration through the air. Her eyes, tired and red, flicked to the horizon where strange lights, cold and flickering, rose in the distance. The elder rebel's voice was hoarse. What is it? He's going to wipe the planet. All of it. A chill swept through the survivors. There was no time to plan, no time to gather forces. The last weapon had already been set in motion. The only hope, the only chance, was to reach Voss before the end. A small team. One final push. Clark, the elder, and the last of the fighters, barely more than a handful, descended into the heart of the broken citadel, their steps fast, breath tight. The tunnels twisted like veins through the iron ruins. The air grew colder, thicker. The hum of destruction grew louder with every step. Every face in the team knew the truth. This was the last stand. There would be no retreat, no surrender either. They stopped, Voss or Valora would be ashes. The first ambush came without warning. Automated turrets, still active despite the AI's fall, sprang to life in the narrow corridors. Blazing plasma bolts ripped through the air. 2 rebels fell instantly, their bodies torn apart before they could scream. Clark dove for cover, her heart pounding in her ears. The elder returned fire with shaking hands, taking down one turret, then another. They pushed on, breathless, desperate. The next threat came from within rogue, human soldiers. Cut off from the chain of command, but still loyal to Voss, still wearing the cold black armor of Earth. They attacked without mercy, without words. The firefight was brutal. The rebels fought like animals cornered, wounded but unbroken. Blood stained the walls, bodies fell, and still they moved forward. Minutes felt like hours. Every step was a lifetime. The tunnels twisted and turned until at last they reached it. A massive vault door, half buried in rubble, lights flickering red. Behind it, the Omega device already active. The countdown showed only minutes remaining, and standing before it calm. Silent was Commander Voss. He was alone, his once pristine armor was cracked, scorched by the chaos above. His face, at last visible beneath the shattered visor, was pale, expressionless, inhuman in its cold stillness. His eyes were like ice. He raised his weapon without a word. The final battle began. The gunfire inside that narrow chamber was deafening. Clark moved without thinking, diving, firing, her heart hammering as Voss cut down to more rebels in seconds. The elder fell, wounded, crawling through blood-soaked rubble. The last survivors pressed in, desperate, knowing they could not outlast him. Voss moved like a machine, cold, perfect, unstoppable, and then through the chaos Clark saw the detonator, the device, the countdown. 30 seconds. There was no time, she screamed, pushing forward, her hands reaching for the console, even as Voss turned his weapon on her. She felt the blast, white-hot fire tearing through her side, but she kept moving. Every breath was agony. Every heartbeat unclacked. Her fingers, slick with blood, slammed the override. The countdown froze. The countdown froze. Voss's eyes flickered, and then slowly he fell. A single shot. The elder rebel, bloodied, near death, had fired. The last round. The bullet struck Voss's skull cleanly, shattering the monster's final command. It was over. The silence that followed was absolute. Clark collapsed to her knees, her breath shallow, her vision swimming. The last surviving rebels stood motionless, too stunned to speak. The Omega device lay silent. The world above, still burning, still broken, was safe. For now, for the first time they had one, hours later. As the first rays of Valora's pale sun broke over the ruins, the people emerged from the shadows. They gathered in the streets, families, children, the wounded, the lost. They stood together, beneath a sky no longer filled with black ships. The Deathworlders' grip was broken. The invaders, what remained of them, fled or surrendered. And from the ashes, something new was born. Freedom Clark, her body broken but alive, stood beside the Elder. Watching the sunrise, her voice, soft, cracked the stillness. "They'll come back," she whispered. The Elder nodded. "Then we'll fight again." The wind stirred the dust at their feet, and together they stood, two species, once enemies, now bound by blood. By sacrifice, by a shared vow, Valora would never fall again, not without a fight. And above them, as the smoke cleared, the stars shone cold and distant, silent witnesses to the day the Deathworlders were defeated.